Welcome to Trailer Punk Podcast. My name is Justin Hamline, and I have the honor of having, I swear I've emailed them a million times, and I apologize. Ladies and gentlemen, Street Sects, amazing, amazing group. I'm really excited. Thank you guys for taking the time to be on my podcast.
Yeah, no,
Wonderful to be here.
thank you. Yeah, and thank you for being persistent. I'm glad that we could finally do this. When we have something to actually talk about. So thank you, Justin.
Yeah, no problem. I was just because when I first started the podcast, I was like, okay, I have like a list, like a wish list of artists that I need to have on. And it was like, you guys were top number one, like underground, everything about Street Sex connects to me lyrically, musically, live performance, aesthetically with your album art. Just everything is so on level where it was just like, okay, it's very one of those rare moments where I can connect with an artist on every level. And it was just like, just godsend, dude. You guys are incredible. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. And to that point, I just want to say thank you for your thoughtful, descriptive reviews, the video reviews.
Oh, thank you.
And that in no way means that you have to continue saying nice things.
Mhm.
Feel free to blast us, but yeah, the spitting images reference as a busted jaw at 3 a.m. is
Yeah.
pretty stellar description.
Wow.
so
Thank you
so
so much.
thanks.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, go ahead and take the time. Let everybody know you guys got a tour and two albums on the Health label. Go ahead and pour yourself out if you need to.
Oh, yeah. So we're releasing two albums simultaneously on August 15th, one under our classic name, Street Sects, and that album is titled Dry Drunk. And it's our usual kind of hard-hitting sample-based punk, sound collage, industrial stuff. And the other record is under a new project named Street Sects, and it is a bit more kind of song-focused, kind of synth pop type of record that we had a lot of fun making. And yeah, we begin a tour the day after the records come out on August 16th. First shows in Seattle with Insula, Iscariot, King Yosef, and Youth Code. And that'll be going through most of the major cities in the US.
Cool. Yeah, I'm really excited. You guys have been very cryptic with your promotion. I don't want you guys to give anything away if you don't need to, but can you kind of give them an idea of the inspiration for these albums and kind of what they can look forward to?
Have we been cryptic? I feel like we posted more content in the last couple months than we have ever.
Well, there's not a lot of like I mean, again, with just this most recent one, you had it looks like a sobriety coin kind of flipping around, and I'm like, what, it's very like, what are they, what are they promoting? What are they taught? You know what I'm saying? So if there's anything that you can give away for everybody, just to kind of give them a little taste, like, tell me anything. I'm really excited.
Well, the record is called Dry Drunk. Like in recovery circles, dry
Mhm.
drunk is kind of a term for a person who has gotten sober, but still exhibits the same behaviors that they did when they were an addict. So it's kind of like, yeah, you've given up the drugs or the alcohol, but you haven't really fixed whatever's wrong with you psychologically. So, you basically you're an asshole, you're unpleasant, you're just kind of, you're doing things that are self-destructive, even without the help of chemicals. So that's kind of the theme of the record is kind of like, because this record is in a way kind of a spiritual sequel to End Position, which was specifically about the hell of addiction. We kind of wanted to close out the whole addiction narrative within our work with kind of like this record about the kind of flip side of that, about what sobriety is like, and specifically what sobriety is like when you're white knuckling it, as they say, which means trying to manage sobriety without a program or without a sponsor or without a therapist or without any kind of actual professional help.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of and the reference in that little teaser video is also to the lyrics of the upcoming single, which I guess the single will be out probably by the time you put this out there. So the single is called The Glass Shithouse, and in the beginning of the track, the narrator of the song is just getting he's coming out of a night spent in jail, and he's going to a meeting and picking up his day one his day one chip. Yeah, I forget what they call that right now. Your what is it? Your promise chip.
Yep, the 24-hour chip.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow, that's awesome. That's amazing. What with full color clips, tell me a little bit more. I mean, are you still kind of being cryptic? A look, is there a comic book with this? Is that going to be in the sleeve?
The comic book is not going to be in the sleeve, so the comic is attached to the project, and it's a collaboration between us and the artist who did the cover art for.
Yeah, AJ.
Oh, yeah, no, the artist that's doing all this street sex full color clip stuff is this guy named Alan who goes by the name Flops Comics online.
Okay.
And he's kind of got like a bit more of kind of like a vintage pulp pinup girl kind of style to his art, which we thought was perfect for this kind of new, more fun, more poppy kind of project. So anyway, yeah, so we've been working with him to do kind of like a weekly comic that's just basically, a panel or two every week on social media, but it will eventually be compiled into an actual book.
That's awesome. That's exciting. That's really exciting. Tell me about being signed to Health label. Tell me how that kind of came together.
Well, we were getting ready to do the record again, with the Flenser, the label we've worked with for a long time. And, there was kind of some hangups and some stalling, with like some legal stuff because we had to sign a new contract.
Of course.
And we were kind of, just kind of like a little bit nervous for like, like the signing over the masters for the whole catalog and stuff. And we were kind of like on the fence about that. And I think what it kind of boiled down to in the end is that we had worked on both of these albums simultaneously with the intention of releasing them both simultaneously, and that was really important to us because they were kind of like it was important for us to kind of like show people that, hey, we've done both of these records at the same time, and they're kind of like two sides of the same coin in a way. And I think the Flenser was they were kind of back and forth a little bit on it, but I think in the end they were like, yeah, that's kind of a risk, because it is. It's the kind of thing that could be a flop and it could lose money. So we totally understand where they were coming from. And in the end, they were like, yeah, we'll do the heavy record first and then the pop record later. And we were just kind of like, that was just kind of a huge bummer. So, we've been friends with Health for a long time. And, just talking to John on the phone, I kind of told him where we were at with like the 2-record thing and stuff. And he was like, hey, we might be able to help you. And, within like a week of having that phone call, they kind of presented this idea to us. And like a week after that, the ball was rolling, so.
That's a great collaboration too. Like it works so well hand in hand that you guys would be share a same label with Health. I think that's fantastic.
It is a very good fit to work with them. That 2022 tour we did was our favorite tour ever. Just the personalities involved, and we've always loved their music, and they were just great to be around, including everybody, including all the Perturbator people and all the merch staff that they had. And it just seems like they have a lot of thriving positivity around them. And us having not played for so long, that was a very welcome thing. It was nice to end that and go, wow, that really was our best tour. Just not having to force anything, just based on the good vibe, I'll say.
Right. Did that tour, Shaun? I'm going to go ahead and ask you a couple questions musically.
No questions to Shaun.
None. These goats, no more. Did that tour kind of influence you to expand musically, especially with these 2 new albums coming out? What were your influences in going into these 2 new records?
The tour did not influence the music.
Okay.
The music spans over quite a bit of time. The pop stuff, you could almost say, is super old in origin. Leo and I have always listened to different kinds of music. From the time I met him, we would just listen to all kinds of things. Leo's actually this is going way back, but he's the person who introduced me to the Smiths in like 2002. So we've always been, it's been pretty varied, and in some of our earliest recordings that were more guitar driven, we had some pop leanings in there, very angular guitar stuff. didn't really use electronics at the time, so that opened it up more. So it was always kind of in the background. And with Dry Drunk, there was a bit of stop and start with it. I started a lot of those sketches in 2020 when we got off the road with, I want to say, Portrayal of Guilt, ended about January. And then, of course, we all know what happened by March, April. And so we were kind of holed up in a house in East Austin. And I think we were all getting a little bit of government assistance or something. So most of us were not working, and I was just working on some of those tracks. But then we had a pause on everything due to some pretty tragic circumstances, and we didn't resume working on those demos until closer to Leo. Was it closer to the health tour that we started chatting with Ben, or was it just before that? I feel like it all kind of happened together. Like maybe the tour was happening, but we were also talking with Ben.
I think we might have reached out to Ben after the health tour,
Okay.
or around the same time. Yeah, like you said.
Okay. And to clarify, I'm talking about Ben Chisholm, who is a primary production songwriter in Chelsea Wolfe. He's been in that project since the beginning. And he really, and so I was going to let go. I thought we were going to scrap everything because we're talking years now, years of, and those weren't, I wrote a lot of demos, maybe up to 30, 35 sketches. I didn't know if we would come back to any of them. A lot of our songs for Street Sects are scattershot and very, very crazy, and they can be collage like. So you can always kind of pull from them what you will. And going through a lot of that material, there was some good stuff. And nevertheless, I thought that we were going to start over because just so much time had passed. I didn't know if I could re-enter the feeling for those tracks. But Leo had actually been demoing vocals at the time throughout 2020 and really wanted to return to them. So the deal was that, because I there was pushback. I was like, oh, I actually just want to rewrite. Let's go with something else, something maybe even a little heavier. I'm not sure what the exact motivator was, but the deal was just take these sketches that you have. Many of them were in song length, maybe in several sections worth, but not totally mixed or fully realized.
Of course.
And the deal was get these together, send them over to Ben, and see what his production might add to them tonally. And that got that rolling with those demos. And I think we added 2 tracks that ended up on Dry Drunk that were not part of that I had written later, like sometime in 2021. And that includes also a track that did not end up on Dry Drunk, but that we put out in the middle of the health tour, X amount. I kind of wrote that in 2021 as well, and it sort of tied in because we had been talking about moving in that direction anyway, something a little more groove based and very arpeggiated and heavy, and X amount sort of fit that. So Leo actually hadn't done vocals to that track before, and right before the tour, I mean, it was like weeks, and I was like, oh, come on, you gotta this would be great to put out in the middle, just as something new, because we had been gone for a minute. So that's how that came together. Does that, I didn't really talk about Full Color Eclipse.
Yeah, good.
Well, other than like a love of pop that's old, I definitely have moved into different production areas as we progressed. I think that there's a lot of electronic that has helped our music. I mean, I know that we've come at it from like a hardcore angle,
Yeah, of course.
in terms of our industrial, but I pull from a lot of other sound designers that are not in the genre. And I guess at some point we just wanted to move into that territory. And they actually crosstalk quite a bit. My process doesn't really change. I mean, I might open up the laptop, get one of several different DAWs, and just start working. And the sound design aspect of it doesn't go away, whether it's pop or more heavy collage like stuff. The difference may be that with the pop music, you're trying to reel it in and get hooks and get things that are melodic. So sometimes that takes away certain sound design elements that would overtake like a very clear melodic element, like a bass line or chords or things that the ear would latch onto. And with our other heavier project, it's sometimes the music will mask the vocals as well. That's been an issue with Leo before, like getting a mix or a demo of something that is just so filled with stuff flying around that it's a challenge to sing to, uh, which in the end makes a really interesting product. I mean, when you can fight through it, but it's also work for the listener. So when it comes to the pop music, some of that, even though that's primarily what I like to create, is that type of collage work. That's my favorite stuff, more than drums or melody or any of that stuff. I really like just sound design.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it shows. Sorry, I hope I wasn't
No,
interrupting.
please jump in.
Um,
I'm going into ramble territory.
oh, you're good because you brought up 2020, and this one really shocked me. Was Cordero, your short story that you have out on Bandcamp? And again,
That was a fun one.
Leo kicking ass with the story. His narrating is haunting, and
Yeah, I know.
you
I was in the next room. We did it all in one night. We
it
did it
was
all for a Bandcamp Friday, I believe.
it was amazing. And please tell me more about that. It haunted me. The story haunted me. The music haunted me. Just it reminded me like old time radio or like the book on cassette stuff that I used to listen to when I was a kid. Tell me about coming at that project for me.
That's so cool that you listened to it. Thank you.
Mhm.
It's one of those that occasionally I'll see a comment about, and I'm like, we should do some more of that. That was
Oh,
super
good.
fun.
Please do.
Well, I'm sure Leo can tell you more about the story element of it. The it was interesting, like the last minute pressure of it. I don't know if it left us with the best end result in terms of what it could be or something like that could turn into, but it definitely pushed us to create it.
Mhm.
And like I said, he had written it out, and then I don't know, Leo. Do you remember if you started like 2 or 3 or 4 a.m.? I mean, it was like it was getting into that territory. And as he was recording certain, I don't know if we want to call them chapters or sections, he was sending them over to me via email or AirDrop, and then I was adding the soundscape to it as we went along, just with the intention of when we're done, we're going to put it out.
Yeah, it was
And
definitely super fast. Yeah. I think yeah, because we've always included some semblance of like a piece of short fiction with all of our releases, or at least most of them. So, I think at that time, uh I was listening to like a lot of different horror podcasts. I think I was listening to like No Sleep and like Knife Point Horror.
oh yeah, you had me listening to those.
Yeah, and I was really into that, and like you know, that was kind of like, at least, with what little writing I've done in the fiction realm since the project started, like I hadn't really tried to write like a horror story. And so I thought it would be fun to give it a shot. And we were basically living in a haunted house at the time. I mean, as not like Ghost in the Night kind of haunted house, but I mean, it was just like just a horrible dump of a place that, I mean, when we moved in there, it had been abandoned for years. I mean, there was like squatters in there before, so all the walls were like covered in spray paint and stuff. And I think, Shaun, you even talked to like one of the neighbors or something, and they told you that a previous tenant had been so frightened by the house, or some kind of ghostly sensation in the house, that they were like sleeping in their van out in front of the house rather than sleep inside.
Oh, I don't
Um,
remember that. This neighbor, yeah, it was there were two houses on the property. One was the one we lived in, and the other one was a much smaller one. Ours was like this green color painted on the outside, and the one to the left was like a bit yellow and smaller. And it was kind of boarded up, I think, but you could like get in there and see around. And this neighbor across the street told us that at, he had been there for over 15 years on that street in East Austin, and he said that just he saw all types of people roll through there, and just various parties and things. And I think he felt that the house in the left had orgy sort of satanic orgy parties going on at one
Yeah,
point.
that's right. Yeah, because one of
But
the rooms, like you went in, because we had to go in there to like clean it out, and one of the rooms was like
oh
like
yeah,
the windows had been sealed off, and everything in the room had been painted black, and they were like what looked to be like restraints had been like permanently attached to like one of the walls, like where you would restrain somebody. I mean, it was creepy.
I was in there maybe once or twice. Once with you, and then I think when we had this guitarist in the band and come live in that house, which was probably his nightmare for however many months that was. He it was not a good experience for him, I assure you. And he went on tour with us as well, and he wanted to see it, so I know we went through it again. And I just can't be around that sort of stuff for very long, so I think I dipped out pretty quickly.
Yeah, and so we this was the second of two, basically piece of shit houses with cheap rent that we were living in, and so we had kind of gotten used to like a fast turnaround on roommates. So, we'd like somebody would move in and they'd had, after a couple of months, they'd had enough and they find somewhere better. So we had a roommate move in named Cordero, and super nice guy, by the way. He's not a scary person, but he moved in and, he did have some strange mannerisms. For instance, like he would cook bacon every day. And so that so that kind of like was kind of part of like what triggered part of like some of the ideas for the story. And he would be like out in the backyard doing the sprinting training or whatever he was doing, like back and forth, like you look out the window and there you go, boom boom, zoom zoom zoom, back and forth in the yard. And at 2 o'clock in the afternoon in the middle of August. So those all those things, the house, the roommate, that kind of stuff, it was all what was actually happening at that time. And then, we just thought it would be fun to kind of turn it into a little audio drama.
It's so cool.
I pointed out before, but I just can't believe he didn't wake up, because this was around 4 or 5, and we were getting to like the climactic point in the story, and there's a point where Leo screams his name out, and I was like, just hearing it through the walls, I thought he was going to wake up and wonder what's happening, or think we're insane and move out the next day.
That made me jump. Like I was at work listening to it. I work a factory job, and most of the time I'll listen to music, and kind of work on my reviews and everything like that. Or, if I change it up, I'll kind of throw on an podcast or an audiobook or something. But I was like, boom, threw that on, and I jumped in the middle of work. I was just like, yeah. And I was just like, dude, that was it stuck, like the story stuck with me for like a couple days where I just could not stop thinking about it.
Nice. Effective.
So good.
Thank you for listening, Justin.
Yeah, no problem. Let's give everybody kind of like a history. You guys can go one at a time. Kind of start at the beginning. Tell me as much as you want about growing up, music influences, and then kind of work your way into the start of Street Sects. Like if you had any bands previously or were working on any other music prior to that. But yeah, go ahead, start with anybody and just kind of give everybody kind of like a bio of your life before Street Sects.
Should we start with my birth or or
Sure, you want to go that deep? No,
Leo has a more rich history with previous bands than I do.
Shaun, you want to start or you want me to start?
You go ahead.
Well, I grew up in upstate New York, in a town called Saratoga, and then partway through high school, I moved to another town nearby called Stillwater. I probably played in my first band in Stillwater, New York, with some friends. Like it was kind of like a punk cover band kind of thing. We played like a birthday party, and then we played like some Battle of the Bands thing at school. And then I quickly moved to I ran away from home because I wasn't happy with my living situation at the time. So I was kind of like living in the woods with like some other people I was playing music with, and basically doing drugs with and shoplifting with and stuff like that. And my mom gave me the option to move down to South Florida to live with my uncle, which I did. And then when I got down there, I started going to high school down there, and I met up with a guy in my choir class who who played in a hardcore band, and like this, they were like a real band that was playing shows and like doing out of town shows and stuff. That guy was this guy Terrence, who's now in the band Locrian. I'm not sure if you've heard of them, but this was a band called Failsafe. It was kind of like my first real band, a hardcore band, and I started off playing guitar for them. And then we did a couple of like demo tapes that we recorded in a local studio. Like this is back in the reel to reel days. This is like '95 or something. And after a couple demos and playing around shows with them, like these guys, like, their families had a little bit more money than mine, so they were able to upgrade their gear, and my gear was terrible. Like I had a horrible piece of shit Randall amp and piece of shit guitar, and they were like, "Well, Leo, your guitar really is not cutting it, like, and we don't want to kick you out of the band, so we decided we're just going to make you the singer," and so that's kind of how I ended up becoming a singer in a band. Was I just was kind of like. Kind of happened upon it, and then of course after doing that and playing the first show, I fell in love with it and played in that band and a couple of other hardcore bands and kind of like a weird art rock band called Kilborough, and then I kind of had like a solo project band called Dreams Die First, which was kind of like an acoustic based singer songwriter kind of thing, but with a bit of like an emotive kind of I don't know what you call it, post hardcore kind of vibe. Yeah. And that's around the time I met Shaun. He and I both worked at a Barnes and Noble cafe, like a Starbucks cafe at a Barnes and Noble. And this was like
quarters, yeah. So
okay, this was in Fort Myers, Florida, okay. And there really wasn't much there in terms of like youth culture or anything like that. So this particular cafe was kind of like one of the small little hubs where musicians and people who were into anything remotely underground would kind of, frequent from time to time. So it was me, Shaun, a few other people from a few other local bands working there. And, I had asked Shaun to join that project that I was in at the time as a guitar player. And we started working together and, I'm not sure if I've ever told this story specifically, but like, when Shaun first joined the band, like he was younger than me, so he hadn't really played in a lot of bands. I think he had like one or two of his own bands, but I think he was still kind of new. So like he was kind of like he was perhaps like not as proficient musically as some of the other people that were in that band or myself. Right. But like he would show up to practice early every week, and he would go home and he would practice, and he was taking lessons, and he basically just devoted himself to playing guitar in a way that like I had never seen anybody do with such like just like fanaticism. Right. And within like a few months to 6 months, he was way better than me on guitar, and just as good, if not better, than the other guys in the band. And him and I just kind of really clicked, and we started working on stuff together. Like, and I was like, you know what? Like, I'm writing all these songs, myself, like on guitar, and I'm not a very good guitar player. Like, I would rather like work, co-writing this kind of stuff with somebody else so I can focus more on vocals. And so that's what he and I did. And then we ultimately changed the name of the project, or basically just started a new band called The Soft Perversion, which at that point, Shaun's guitar playing skills were so off the charts, in my opinion, that he was writing all the music and I was just focusing on vocals, and I laid the guitar down altogether. And that was kind of what we did for a number of years. We had a lineup there in Florida for a while. It was probably my favorite iteration of that project, with a few other guys who were all from like other parts of the country that had just ended up in Florida for whatever reason. And we managed to talk everybody in that band to moving up to Massachusetts together as a band. We went up there. That didn't work out so good. That lineup broke up. Shaun and I ended up back in Florida, where we started the project over with another lineup. That went on for about a year. Then Shaun and I at different times moved to Athens, Georgia, where we had a third lineup, and we did that for about a year and a half. And then that third lineup broke up. And so Shaun and I kept working on the project, but we were in different cities at that point. And so we were basically just, Shaun would be writing these kind of demos on GarageBand or Logic or whatever we had at the time, and with just like drum machines and synths and guitar, and sending them to me, and I'd record vocals, and we kind of just did that until we decided to move to Austin together, and we did that, and we tried to keep that electronic pop kind of thing that we were doing at the time going, but you know, we had some difficulties there. I ended up going to rehab for the first time, and we kind of took a break, and then we regrouped. I want to say a year and a half, 2 years later, maybe. And I was back in Athens, Georgia. He was still in Austin. We started kind of conceptualizing the band together over phone calls and ideas of what we wanted to do. And we knew that we didn't want to try to put together another full band with other musicians because, like, you know, at this point, Shaun and I have already gone through 3 different lineup changes because people flake out, they quit, they move away, they get married.
Always the drummer.
Yeah. And at that point, I mean, I've been in like probably 10 bands at that point, you know, with, you know, various breakups and people moving away or quitting. And so we're just like, you know, the one thing, you know, obviously there's ups and downs to electronic music, but the one thing you can say about a laptop is that, you know, you don't have to worry about it showing up late to practice, you know? and so that was kind of like, because I wasn't really excited about doing an electronic project, because in my mind, I'm just picturing 2 guys on stage with electronics, and it just wasn't the kind of music I grew up listening to and kind of envisioning myself doing, you know? You know, I was always a big fan of rock and metal and that kind of stuff. So, you know, we're kind of like, well, this is a way that we can continue to play music and create music, and we know that it's going to always be there, you know, as long as you and I are working together on this. And so, you know, we talked about what we wanted that to be, and it's like, and I think, like I said, okay, we can do electronic music, but let's make it as fucking extreme and weird and experimental and just like in your face, you know, brutal as possible. And you know, Shaun perhaps reluctantly agreed to that at first, but as soon as we actually started working on it and started talking about it, you know, he was excited and I was excited, and we just little by little over the space of a year to a year and a half before we ever released anything, we just kind of chipped away at demos and conversations until we narrowed it down to exactly what we wanted to do with the project.
Beautiful.
You see, this is why he writes the lyrics. He's just much better with the narrative, and I have useless tidbits. That's all that I've got.
Yeah, you could. Yeah, Shaun, what made you kind of want to go into music production wise, and kind of evolve into, you know, everything being on laptop and drum? Because believe me, I was a drummer. I had to deal with bands and shit like that, and then I eventually went synthesizers and drum machines is my way to go, just because I feel like I have a little bit more control over it. Shaun, what's your story on this?
Well, I need to relate something, because his whole timeline just took me back. That period where I joined his band, Dreams Die First, it was definitely a rocky time. I had played guitar since middle school or so, and my highlight then was, I'm going to be Yngwie Malmsteen. Never got anywhere close, not even, but it was like the goal. And when we started working together, he and I would get together separately from the band practices and listen to music, usually totally drunk. But it would just be the 2 of us just listening to records, and it was a wonderful time. It's rare that happens in adulthood, especially in the age of streaming. I've never, maybe somebody will put a record on at a party and try to get your interest toward it, but I've never, you know, other than hearing it in a club or a DJ or something, it's rare to have that experience. Not in youth. And so I remember the night he found out I had never heard Thunder Road. So he's like, man, you've never heard Thunder Road? I'm like, no, let's go. And then he had a big stereo system in his room, and we would blast the shit out of Thunder Road. And I went after that, I went on to, I was kind of listening to some Neil Young there. And then more Bruce Springsteen. I was listening to Nebraska, which is a beautiful album, and it's very harmonica forward. So one of the practices, and I'm newly in this band, and these other band members are not quite feeling the vibe, but they can see that Leo and I are becoming like fast friends, and that I am more in line with Leo's thinking in terms of how can we be more creative, because some of these other, not to put them under, but places like Fort Myers, Florida, often if you play shows around there, like the early 2000s, people are just sort of aping other bands.
Oh, yeah.
You want to sound like the emo bands of the time. And so they had a lot of that, a lot of those kind of riffs, a lot of the kind of looks. And Leo was already into interesting stuff and he was turning me on to that. But, but the way it came out, I remember one time I came over in the evening and I had acquired a harmonica and like a Takamine guitar, acoustic guitar, like a hollow body. And I brought it and I was like, hey, check this out. I got it right here. And we went to the back porch and I was playing him this like riff and playing the harmonica. And he's like, yeah, man. He went and got one of the other guys in the band. And this guy, Jeremy, and he's like, Jeremy, come back and hear this. The look on his face of like total disappointment as he sees me like ripping this harmonica and like playing this. And Leo's like, yeah, man, isn't that great? Like, Leo, do you remember that?
Yeah, I do actually.
Man,
yeah.
He was so bummed out. Oh my God. He did not. That was not the direction he was looking for. So that. But what was the question?
Yeah, just kind of your like your backstory. Like growing up and everything, and what kind of influenced you into getting into music.
Definitely seeing some of my dad's vinyl records. I mean, it's just typical stuff like the Beatles and Rolling Stones, Beach Boys, kind of checking that out. He had an old Gretsch guitar. Again, he kept in a closet. Occasionally take it out, play one chord and put it right back in. But he would like sort of dazzle me with it. He'd be like, oh, wow, this is maybe there's something special to this thing. He keeps tucking away. So eventually I would take it out and play it. And in the 90s, of course, I became, again, Florida. There's a lot of Florida vibes coming off this whole story, but got very, very much into Metallica. And that was actually my first concert. It was like my father and my best friend that lived across the street and his father, and they took us to see Metallica in West Palm Beach. I think Jerry Cantrell opened, and this band Days of the New. All these bands kicked off that like Creed voice, you know what I'm talking about?
Absolutely, dude. Days of the New, that whole post grunge whole, like they were trying to do the Alice in Chains Unplugged thing. Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. Like it just trickled down from a Seattle thing, and it just was like a weird muted horn every vocal line. So, but that kind of stuff, as a kid was just, I was obsessed, and I went back to the records, but it's funny. I'm actually very, because we just had like the however many years reunion, anniversary of Load, and there were a lot of jokes going around, but I'm often very nostalgic for some of those songs because that was coming out in like 96, I think, Load, and then the terrible Reload that occurred a year later. And I'm often, I don't really listen to it, but that was my introduction. And then of course quickly went back to the records, having my mom take me to Kmart or something, like every once in a while, and getting a new album and spending time with it, and locking my bedroom door so she wouldn't see me, jumping around riffing air guitar.
Yeah.
But I really didn't want to be anything other than a guitarist for a long time. Through most of my writing with Leo, that band that we started after Dreams Die First, some things reshuffled, and then we found some people who were really interesting in Fort Myers. They came from elsewhere. And this other guitarist that we had in that band, he was really into Suede, or the London Suede, some of those records, and Sonic Youth. And we would get together, and I just like if one tried to play to a recording, I would just listen to him play and then get together, and we'd try to one up each other. I don't know if that made for great songs, but just a lot of dueling riffs. That weren't solos, but in that sort of matching angular guitar style. And then, of course, as mentioned beforehand, the Smiths, Johnny Marr's playing. So very quickly, we were trying to move into a different tone of guitar for that band, a softer version. Also at that time, 2003 or so, were a lot of those clean crunch bands that were getting famous, like the Strokes, so that kind of guitar tone we were trying to create live, would not sound like them, but to get some of that, where it's like kind of crunchy heavy, but also a lot of clarity in the chords. So we were doing that for a period of time, but we really couldn't get that together. And like Leo said, I think we sort of fumbled with that project for a number of years. We kept trying to move somewhere. That first lineup, it just, they were young kids, and so it was a weird adventure to Massachusetts. We lived in this old factory town, Holyoke,
Mm-hmm.
and we had a practice space that was like an, I don't, they made like World War II artillery parts in there at one time, and it still looked that way. You'd like open it up and it was like these, it was a huge giant room filled with like just metal, and it didn't look like most practice spaces. They're not great
No.
often, except for the ones that you pay for by the hour or something. But a lot of the ones that someone will own and rent out to bands, it's usually like a hallway and some rooms, and they're kind of padded and taken care of. But this was something else. This was like, maybe I don't even know how long this was going to be rented to bands, but it was definitely a curious thing. And it was all odd. Those band members took off. They got cold feet, and Leo and I stuck it out for a bit. Went back to Florida, had our time in Athens there. And while I have a lot of like formative memories of what could become Street Sex,
Yeah.
we really didn't get anything together. We just drank too much. I saw. I growing up in Fort Myers again, like didn't see a lot of music. That was another thing. You had to get somebody, whoever had the car. You would go to like Tampa or St. Pete, which is like a few hours away from Fort Myers, and even then, a lot of bands won't go down to Florida. So it was a rare thing. And then when I moved to Athens about 2006 into seven, and we were just constantly going to shows. I mean, it's a small town, but it's rich history
It's rich
of,
history.
yeah, music. Even to stroll the streets and to casually see Michael Stipe and things like that, it was just eye opening. And all the bands toured through there, played at the 40 Watt Club, and we would go there. But we, of course, would fill up a backpack with PBR,
Yeah.
and a lot of those memories, they're it's Swiss cheese. I do have one that became something I leaned on later when we started the band, and that was when we went to see Converge. I,
Ooh.
I had never listened to them before, and really wasn't into hardcore. I can't even say I wasn't into it; it just wasn't on the radar.
Right.
Leo was talking it up a bit, and of course, I'm sure we pre-gamed some of that disgusting PBR and filled up a aforementioned backpack, and we went to see them. I believe it was on the Axe to Fall tour,
Yeah.
and that was through my drunken haze. It was a very intense experience. I actually almost got beat up because I got so drunk that I started pushing people. I was behind, like there's always the center mosh pit, and then there's a little bit on the outside, and the people that are kind of surrounding those moshing, and they're kind of like throwing their hands up. Well,
Yeah.
I was going behind them and pushing them, and at one point, somebody, very very muscular bound fellow, kind of grabbed me by the shoulder from behind. He's like, "Hey, I'm just gonna let you know you're gonna get hurt if you keep doing that."
Oh my God.
Not from him. He was giving me a warning, and
Generally.
it definitely got through. I was like, "Oh, someone's watching me. I'm not in the dark freaking out here."
Right.
I don't know that I listened to Converge at that point
Hmm.
or got more into hardcore. I feel like I really dove into their stuff when they put out All We Love, We Leave Behind in 2014. And then, tied that, we were starting the band at that point, but I tied that in with Jane Doe, and of course just went into other bands as well at that time. But that always sticks out because that was an oddball for things that I might have seen at that time, 2006-ish. And then again, still like no electronic stuff. I think I started messing around with some software something before Logic. It wasn't Pro Tools. It was like a really cheap free version of something. And I was making some sound collages, adding guitar, and maybe using something comparable to like a Casio keyboard, hitting play on it, getting a beat going, and then writing some stuff. I made a few demos from that while living in Athens. And then there's just like a huge gap between then and when we finally decided to move to Austin, because I had taken a break from music to go to school for a minute, return to school. The many times I returned.
Yep.
And when we finally got going, we had written some demos. Our conversations about music were always they were always dangerous because I would get excited about music again in a way that I wasn't if we weren't talking about it. And I didn't really, and even over the years, I've never really known other people to just reel me in and get me into a band. It's very rare that I've like joined some other people and played some music. I've done it here and there, but there's just something about the chatting with Leo and his interest in just being as creative as possible, and that it's actually doable. I don't know. Maybe some people love getting with musicians and just banging things out and they come up with some cool stuff, but it's always been a bit more conceptual on the front end for me and Leo. And I've liked that. So we would, at the time I had returned to school. I was back in Fort Myers and he was in Jacksonville. And we were every once in a while chatting on the phone and, you know, getting kind of amped. And I wasn't doing music at all, but suddenly I was like, okay, well, maybe I can create something that was like a software version through software. I was probably using Logic at that point, and then send it over. And we made a couple of those. I think one or two of those are on YouTube somewhere. You have to correct me if I'm wrong, Leo, but we did that. And then finally the conversation culminated in I was finishing at school, and that we had just talked it up a lot, and I got excited again about going somewhere. It's just that maybe it's a bit of a romantic idea of packing up something, going, you know, whatever you can fit in the car and going to a city, and that you've got another person who will believe in that lunacy. It's
like a perfect connection. You know what I mean?
Sorry. I paused because there was such silence. I thought maybe the call disconnected.
Oh, no.
I'm sorry. Man, we need a little white noise in this call or something. It's like, oh, it's still going.
Yeah, no, you're good.
Okay. Yeah, so we got excited, and the drummer from a software version, I didn't have much of a connection, but Leo had talked with him for a while. This guy, Joe Feminella, he was living out in Austin with his fiance. And so that was the spot. Neither of us had ever been there. Obviously, it's got a long history of music and art and culture. So I think even now it was a good move, though things are very different in Austin.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yes, but it was the right move. It kept us. I don't know. There were some things about small town life in Athens and other places we've been that I don't know would have been a great creative ground for us, you know. So this was a good spot, and you know, again, like we had to kind of go over what we were going to do when we first moved to Austin. I think that I was trying to pull from things that were coming out in like 2011-ish. You know, I really liked that first record and EP that followed it by James Blake. Mm-hmm. And there are probably many, many more that'll come to mind as I'm talking about it. But that was like in my head, electronic. Also, Matthew Deere. That like I just found that so fascinating. And then I was listening to Aphex Twin a little bit, but it didn't really cross over. And it wasn't until Leo took off, did a stint in rehab, and came back that it just seemed there was an intensity about his return, and he was a bit more clear and focused on taking the electronic element and making it more experimental and heavy. Yeah. So then we were talking about what that could look like, and that, you know, turns into like This Heat and other projects that bring in sort of that wild element, and then including hardcore elements, Portraits of Past, and other bands that I would listen to try to combine in my mind and in the conversations we had as to how this could work. So no real blueprint other than some of these bands and going, well, how can we take a little bit of this and a little bit of that? And it did still take a minute to get to something focused. I think by the time we were making sketches for In Position, I mean, we were beyond that point of the first couple 7 inches and very, very ready to try to make a proper album. So that was much more focused. I those first couple 7 inches were definitely just trying stuff out, like using Ableton, going to cafes, going to this or that plant, various bedrooms I lived in, and trying to create something. And if it wasn't wild enough, I'd send it over to Leo in one way or another. Then it would just bounce back, crazier, heavier, less melodic. It's very hard to get rid of the melodic element if you came from any kind of background that wasn't like experimental jazz or something.
Right,
Like,
right.
it's like a natural human tendency to
Oh,
kind of, yes, yeah, to kind of want that, or even groove based stuff. I think,
going to school, they kind of beat that into you. They really want you to be like, you got to learn your core, you got to learn, and it's just like when you want to go outside the box or outside, whatever, and they kind of go, no, you gotta stick with this certain thing, and go, no, 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 I want to go outside of it. I want to go harder, thrashier, just noise.
yeah,
Like there's beauty in the noise.
yeah, yeah,
Definitely.
yeah, and then when we pre in position, we started uh, getting more involved with the music scene in Austin, and at that time, there's this great noise scene. In 2014, we had at 2014, I believe we had put out definitely the first 7 inch, but maybe the first two. By the time we started having these house parties, at this point, I had moved in with Leo in a house in East Austin. We had 2 to 3 of them before that whole era is over. These horrible houses, and this first one, Leo would book these shows with based on a headliner coming through, and then a lot of local artists that were just fantastic. And I that's where a lot of the education came from, because Austin has a really great analog electronic label called Holodeck.
They do. Yes.
Yes, and there's a lot to pull from that. And at that time, none of the people in that had blown up in any sort of way, so they would either pop into the house party or they would actually play in primary projects or secondary. And then a lot of noise artists. There was a guy here, lives in LA, named Jonathan Cash. He does a project called Breakdancing Ronald Reagan. He was just one of those like very funny, contagious figures who loves noise, and he knew a lot of people as well. So he was once we connected with him, we were able to just play shows that he played, the other house shows, or get some of those projects to play at our house, and those were excellent. That was like the first time I felt like I had some kind of renewed youth in terms of collecting stuff, because I've never been much of a, sorry to say this, like a vinyl collector or a cassette or anything. But at that time, we had done a short tour in 2014, and then all the bands that came through, we had a pretty massive collection of cassettes from artists not on labels or just noise artists. And then a lot of the ones that played at the house, they always had their merch table. We'd make sure everything was set up so they could sell stuff, and often get a free copy of something just because they're playing in the house. And I just ended up with a stack of it. And we had a spare room in that house at one point, not yet rented out. And we set up a record player and a cassette player. And I just would go in there and listen to some of this stuff. And it definitely had a huge effect on me, and still does.
Absolutely. Let me go ahead and give Leo some time to kind of go into lyrics and everything like that. So Street Sex was born out of your recovery from addiction. What role did music play in your healing process, and how does it continue to function in your life today?
Um, it's a good question.
Question. I'm sorry.
Well, like from probably the time I was 16, 15, no, probably before that. From whenever I had my first drink, it was probably, I think I was 15. Um, you know, um, I fell in love with alcohol. Like so. I would say by the time I dropped out of high school down in Florida and had started playing in that first hardcore band that I told you about, I was already I was already pretty much an alcoholic. Like I wasn't the alcoholic I would later become, where I needed alcohol 24/7 just to function. But like, I was in a band with guys who were straight edge, and I dropped out of high school and I was working at this bagel shop, and there was like a, a girl there that I worked with who was 21, and I would get her to buy me like bottles of vodka and stuff, and I would take that home, and I was still living with my mom and her boyfriend at that time because she had moved down to Florida after I had moved there, and I would sneak the liquor into my room, and so like I would, I'd be going to riding my bike to work every day and coming home and getting drunk every night. And, unless I had band practice. And of course I would keep up, I would stay sober for band practice and for shows and things like that. And of course and that, even though I wasn't drinking every day, the fact that I would only drink by myself and I lied to pretty much everybody in my life about the fact that I drank, I mean, it's alcoholic behavior.
Mm-hmm.
And so by the time I moved into my 20s, and I was old enough to drink, and even before I was old enough to drink, I mean, drinking was like a daily part of my life. And then, towards the end of my 20s, I mean, I was just a fucking mess, and I don't even know how. I was one of those barely functioning alcoholics. Like I was still somehow, Shaun and I were still putting bands together. And, we were moved to Massachusetts, we moved to Athens, but like, I think, even him being younger and him still drinking and still being kind of like, we're still in that party mindset where it's all still fun, as long as we're out, at the club or whatever we're doing, or, going to shows or having parties, but I think even he knew that my problem was a little bit more serious, and, so that continued, until it got so bad where it was like, there was no band, there was no functioning. I could barely keep a job. I could barely do anything. I mean, I had to like, if I wasn't drinking, I was sick. So, I kept doing that until it finally until I finally burned every single bridge I had, not only with Shaun, but with anybody else I knew musically, certainly with my mother. And the only option I had left was to go to rehab. So that's kind of a long preamble to say that when I got out of rehab, I had no idea how to function as an adult without the help of alcohol.
Right.
And it's weird because I literally spent every day drunk for years at that point. That like when I had to go to detox, and once I got over the DTs and all of the physical symptoms or at least most of the physical symptoms of withdrawal, like I was still feeling that, like, and I spent almost 2 months in rehab that first time. Like it just kind of felt like my skin was on fire. It felt like I couldn't go into a public place without sweating and shaking.
Yep.
I couldn't. I remember the first show I tried to go to after I got sober was like I think it was an Of Montreal show in Jacksonville, Florida, which is where I went to rehab. And I think I made it through like 2 or 3 songs before I started to feel like I was having a panic attack.
Oh God, yeah.
And I had to get out of there. And so I'm thinking to myself, like, I can't even go to a show. How the hell am I ever going to play music again? I can't even be around crowds of people. And but I mean, I knew, I wanted to play music. I mean, it was the only thing I ever really wanted to do. And so, when Shaun and I kind of patched things up and he was like, okay, we'll try this again, we'll see how it goes. Like we started working on stuff remotely. And we started kind of planning the thing about Street Sects. It was like, it's not that I was just angry all the time, but I was just so in such a heightened state of anxiety and irritability and just kind of like hypersensitivity to everything, because it was like my senses had been dulled for so long that now I'm out here in the world, and it's like every little thing that somebody said that you would normally roll off somebody's back was going to send me into like a fury, and at the same time, like listening to music, made me feel, in a way that I hadn't felt in a long time, because it's like one thing when you're drunk and you're listening to music and there's that kind of chemically enhanced feeling where you're like kind of getting high off the booze and the music at the same time.
Yep.
But like But when you're actually kind of just listening and you're stone cold sober, it's a different kind of high. You know, it's like a
Yeah.
you're kind of analyzing it from like a more cerebral point of view at the same time where you're also kind of feeling those emotions.
It's like
And
analog emotions. It's weird. Like it's like you're starting to feel like you're feeling feelings, and it's just it's crazy. You know what I mean?
exactly, yeah. And you know, and even though like I hadn't played in hardcore at that point in probably 10 years, you know, like I said, I played a few hardcore bands in my teens, late teens, and then Sean and I were mostly exploring different types of genres, you know, after that, you know, like just kind of indie pop and sleaze pop and things like that. And, you know, but like you know, and I've kind of talked about this a little bit, but like, you know, towards the end of my alcoholism, you know, it had like it had transitioned to not just being an alcoholic, but also being a crack addict.
Yeah.
And part of being a crack addict is having to go out on the streets and get crack.
Yep.
And you know, and that in and of itself becomes its own kind of addiction because you don't go to safe, cozy places to buy crack, you know, and you don't get involved with kind, safe people to
No.
buy crack from,
No.
you know. You are pretty much putting yourself in some form of danger or another every day. You're doing that time after time, and there's a sick part of your mind, especially the part of your mind that actually wants to die, the part of your mind that kind of has gotten so sick of yourself and how you're living that you really do want to die.
Yeah.
Kind of,
Yeah.
you kind of get high off of that, like,
Yeah. It's like
oh
another
yeah,
feeling. You know what I mean?
yeah, like I'm gonna get shot tonight, you know, and it's just like, you know, you kind of like that feeling, you know, and and it was tough to get all that kind of stuff out of my head after I got sober, like that kind of like, even though like I wasn't tempted to go use or drink again, like somehow you know, the rehab kind of beat that out of me, at least for that time period, like there was like a part of me that still wanted to be in that fucking world of horror that surrounds drug use.
Yeah. The
And
consistent risk, really.
yeah, and so like that was kind of part of what I wanted the music of Street Sex to be, is I
Right.
wanted to kind of recreate that feeling of danger and horror and self-loathing and just like red alert, you know, like this is as bad as it will ever get
Hmm.
kind of feeling that you really only feel when you're really like at the edge of like, you know, your own mortality with just how fucking stupid you're being, you know, just how self-destructive and dumb you're being. And so uh it was kind of like a lot of artists will tell you like they want to write the record that they want to hear, you know, and
Right.
and going back and listening to like the old hardcore records I used to like and like whatever new heavy stuff was coming out, it wasn't really doing it, you know, it wasn't really fulfilling that desire to just hear every horrifying thing at once.
Right.
So you know, like I remember I went to the movie theater to see a movie that was coming out around that time. Michelle and I started talking. And the movie was called Sinister, and it's not the greatest movie. It's like a studio horror film,
Hmm.
but the movie had really great sound design. And whatever theater I saw it in, like they had the sound system cranked up, and like it was just like this 3D barrage of just like clicks and snaps and weird shuffling and just horrific sounds, kind of like, but it sounded like its own kind of music. And I was like, well, what if there was a band that was just like had all of like the fury and hatred of like great hardcore, but it was
Really.
built with these elements, you know?
Yeah.
So it really does feel like you're taking a trip straight through hell, you know? And so that was kind of, you know, that was kind of the goal. And like, you know, what, like we hadn't heard that yet. Like, you know, and you know, you can dig through all of the history of industrial bands, and we did. And there's a lot of amazing music, but there's nothing quite like that, you
No,
know?
no.
And so that was kind of what we wanted to do and what I kind of felt like I needed to do. And mostly just, you know, just to hear it myself and also to be able to perform music like that and kind of share that feeling with somebody else.
That movie Sinister, dude. That lawnmower scene. Holy shit. Just that just that moment where it's so like, and you nailed it because your music is like those moments where there's calm in the quiet, but then it just comes and hits you, and it's just like you said, that scene, the lawnmower where it's all quiet, and then you just see, and it just yells at you, and it just brings this moment of like intensity. It's wow. You know what? That's such a great analogy. I think that's perfect for the yeah, perfect. I love that. That's so great, Leo. Let's go into In Position. I want to talk about the production and coming at it. And it's one of my favorite records because you took clips from one of my favorite movies, Driller Killer, and you kind of built a world that now that I watched Driller Killer, it now reminds me of In Position. Tell me about coming at it musically and why you use clips from Driller Killer. One of my favorites. One of my favorites.
I must admit I have not rewatched it
Oh,
after making it, and I really should, because I bet it would be the same, and kind of an
so
interesting
good. And it,
experience. I have to give credit to Leo for all movie samples.
mhm.
He I think at the start, especially with Imposition, he provided them. Maybe later I found some here and there that were interesting, but not from specific movies, but just movie samples that maybe a certain quality of it that stuck out. But for the records, specific movies that he was watching, and especially Imposition, he collected them, trying to and with trying to get parts that had music removed so that that wouldn't be in the audio clip, and some of it dialogue and some of it just sounds, other movies as well, with like gunshots and clanks and things, and gave them to me. And as I was writing, I just, wherever I heard that it would fit, I would kind of massage it in there, so to speak.
Yeah.
So that's how that came in. And since we were writing that type of music, certain climactic moments, maybe it required a scream. There's a couple of interludes where it just gets very grimy, and I try to get some of those more shocking, distorted voices coming out of noise or layers of just dissonant sound. So I don't know if Leo wants to speak more about the what drew him to that movie and maybe some of the others from In Position, but that was my role in it. I can never take credit for those specific movies. I was just very happy to place them in there.
Beautiful.
And I remember playing some of the stuff in there. I know one demo we were listening to. We often didn't listen to them together as I was sending him, because we had different jobs, and he would work in the evening, or I think I was working at a hotel at that point. And we would, but there was one I remember just sending it in, like him hearing some of the movie samples in it, and like the look of delight of like, oh, it's in there, like it's working. I can't, I wish I could remember which song specifically, but I remember looking at your face, and it's like, and because to me it was like, it's just at some point it is just another instrument. It's just samples, it's just like another way, if it's in key with a part that I'm working in, or it just happens to work. It's almost no different sometimes than a cymbal or some other thing that I might put in there, but it becomes part of the whole. So it was cool to see like the wonder of it from someone who didn't take part in that, but collected them and handed them to me, and then got to hear them in the whole. If that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think not the most exciting answer, but part of the reason that I grabbed so many samples from Driller Killer was initially we had some dialogue clips from No Country for Old Men, and then when we gave the record in its earliest form to Jonathan at the Flenser, he was like, "You can't have that stuff in there. Stuff's copyrighted, and I'm going to get in trouble for that, and you guys are going to get in trouble for that." And I was like, "Oh, I didn't even think about that. I didn't think that dialogue from movies was like the same kind of problem that if you're sampling somebody else's song." So I had to go and look at a list of all the music. All the movies that are in the public domain and free of copyright. And I came across Driller Killer, and I hadn't seen it. And I was like, "Oh, this is Abel Ferreira." And I looked at his films, and I knew I'd seen Bad Lieutenant, the one with Harvey Keitel, and King of New York, and I'd seen those movies and thought they were really cool. And I hadn't seen Driller Killer, so I started watching that one. And sometimes I would watch the movies as I was kind of mining for samples, and I think I did
Yeah,
that with
I do
Drilling.
that too. I do that too.
Um, so I watched it, and I was like, oh, this movie is a fucking trip. This is a wild movie. And while a lot of the movies I try to pull from usually are like noirs or classic noirs, because there's quite a lot of them in the public domain. Drilling Killer wasn't a noir, but there was it was saying something interesting um, about like the desperation of an artist and the kind of and at least kind of what I got from it. It's been a while since I've seen it, but like kind of like the maybe a little bit of the psychosis that comes with like trying to balance, being an artist with like the phoniness of being an artist, and trying to like, commodify your art. And I feel like there were a lot of themes of uh, of kind of like that kind of struggle at the center of this, what is on the surface just kind of like a slasher film about a guy killing homeless people with a power drill.
Yeah, for
But
sure.
and because of the way a lot of the characters, and specifically like Abel Ferreira, speaks in that film, like he's just got this kind of like this kind of manic New York punk energy to like the way he talks in that film, that just kind of really translates well to the manic nature of the music too, I think.
And actually, one more thing about my experience with the samples, I actually want to say like a deep thank you to the people who have listened to it, who get excited about those and have given me like a greater appreciation for them being in the songs, including you, Justin.
Oh, thank you.
That's yeah, it's very, I think, because I didn't mean to devalue the use of them in terms of composition. At the time you just try to make things work, but over time, because people are such fans of certain types of genres and movies, like just seeing the reactions to it and people trying to figure out, hunt down what is that sound, where's it from. I really love seeing the conversation about them.
Yeah, I appreciate it just because like I'm a big movie buff, and even just when I started doing music, I would always incorporate, movie samples just to be like like even adding it as a music as like an instrument, or even just include it into like a melody where it's like, even just the the beats of dialogue like da 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 da, da, and you can add it to a melody or a beat, really just and heightens it. And just even, even with, the kicking mule and all the film noir stuff that you've added to that, it brings a world in, not just, with Leo, and he kind of builds a story within an album, but you're getting all these elements where it feels like there's a movie in your head, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
Definitely,
yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
And it's
No, I mean like the records, the two records like that I listened to, really young, that made me like movie samples and music were La Sexorcisto Devil Music Volume 1 by White Zombie. I love all of the little dialogue samples and little clips that he's got in that record. And Psalm 69 by Ministry. Like both of those records have some really like pivotal points in their songs where there's dialogue samples from movies where you cannot imagine those songs without them. Like
without
they
them.
are, yeah, they make the songs. They are part of the songs, and like and especially like, and it certainly happened with like because there's so many of them in that White Zombie album, that like where to me that those sounds, because I hadn't seen a lot of those movies, they were just part of the song. And then like when I would watch like later on I saw like the anime movie Legend of the Overfiend, and you hear that opening sound of the record where it sounds like a weird engine synthesizer, and like, oh, that's they and you're watching the movie and it just kind of trips you out because you're like, oh, I know that sound, and it's like it's from the record. And same thing with like I think, yeah, what was it, Carpenter's Assault on Precinct
Mm-hmm.
whatever,
Yeah.
yeah. And like the like I said, up yours, baby,
Yeah.
that kind of. And yeah, it's just I don't know. I just personally like I love it when bands do it well.
Yeah.
Like it's just, obviously there's a lot of music where they just take stuff and they tack it on there, but like when it's actually like it makes a part of a song or it gives a certain part impact, and this is, and like I can give Shaun 100 samples, but like he's the guy that's actually the making those parts work within the music to be effective, and not just tacked on. So, that's it's the one part of like this project that has like, other than me just giving notes on things of like, hey, this part should be longer, or let's try to do heavier or whatever. Like I think that's the only aspect of the band where Shaun and I have actually collaborated on the music. It's just kind of like, here's some samples, and then now you can actually do something cool and musical with them.
Yeah.
So it's fun in that way.
Yeah, and you do it extremely well. With the kicking mule, you've evolved from, your pure screams and, incorporating melody, spoken word and stuff. How did you evolve creatively? Were you trying to personally challenge yourself, or was this just a natural evolution of Street Sect, just kind of diving into another type of style or different ground?
Yeah, I
No,
think.
I don't know, Leo. Do you remember a certain? I know we were in general like, hey, a little bit more guitar and a bit more melody, but and the first one I remember writing, it may not actually be accurate, but whenever I think of that album, I think of this track first because it was just one of the early ones. It's Black and no, wait, are we talking about the Kicking Mule? I went to Rat Jacket. I'm sorry. I was gonna talk.
Yeah, I mean,
I
they're
was gonna
both.
because there was development there.
Yes.
What we did within Rat Jacket, there were again the guitar and a bit of the melody. It led to the Kicking Mule, and I guess my question remains the same: is I don't remember a specific new type of genre that we were trying to pull in.
Right.
And maybe you do, Leo?
No, I don't think that there was a specific type of genre. I think we were just at that point we were just talking about feelings. Like we did say one thing, very early on before we ever wrote M Position, is that we wanted Street Sects to not be backed into a corner musically. We wanted to be like, hey, if we're on record 5 and we want to make a New Orleans jazz record, we want to be able to do that and not have it be some kind of absurd left turn, for fans or for people that have followed the project. So we knew right away we wanted to pivot and kind of expand the sound, but the desire was to kind of want to pivot in a way that felt natural. So you have to retain core elements of the sound that you've created while shifting it towards a different feeling that you're wanting to explore. And so I think on Rat Jacket, we were trying to get stuff that was a bit more melancholic, a bit more sad,
Yeah.
Emotional. And, I think we tried to push further into that with the Kicking Mule, but Kicking Mule was also supposed to be, a little bit nasty too. So like and I think that's kind of why maybe, we we kind of wondered how successful we were at accomplishing that afterwards, because that's a tricky thing to do. Like, this is nasty and mean, but it's also kind of sad, because that's how a lot of like film noir is, like a lot of the samples from Rat Jacket and from Kicking Mule are from a film called Detour, which was like a B-roll noir from the late 40s. And that movie is like, it's a really mean-spirited, nasty movie, but it's also sad and kind of heartbreaking in ways too. And I think that's kind of at the core of like the noir thing. And so I'm sure Shaun and I had a lot of conversations about that. Like, how do we balance like the meanness that we have in Street Sex, but also with a little bit of like, of that sadness there too.
It does have like a sense of like a heartbreak, where it starts off again, like you said, with this noir type of vibe, but then there's no there's not a happy ending to the record. You know what I mean? Like,
no, all the characters in these stories are usually doomed, and they often make very bad decisions.
yeah, and I think that's great. Like, is that just something that you continue to follow? Is there ever going to be a record where it's like, you know what, let's kind of have something a little bit more like positive base to it? Or are you just going, you know what, I know this is how I feel, this is what I'm going to put on a record?
Potential segue into the new project.
Yeah, no, that was exactly why we started the separate project, is because we wanted to be able to to not be, uh, you know, kind of stuck with some of the themes that we've kind of made such a, you know, a focal point of our identity with the other project. You know, kind of get away from that and be like, you know, this stuff can be a little bit more off the wall or risk taking or, you know, just fucking plain silly if we wanted to be silly, you know, and some of it is kind of silly, to be honest.
And with your live performance, are you guys, how do you take it from studio to stage? And are you guys still kind of sticking with the strobe lights and fog machines, or have you kind of like, let's kind of take it in a different direction this tour?
We are sticking with that.
Okay, cool.
I think what's happening, well, for one, it's hard to replace, especially if we're in a space where we can really go a little extreme. I know that is obnoxious. It's definitely obnoxious for people who have seen
Oh, I
us.
love it. People have been,
Well, well, you know, there's always that, you know, there's the concert goer who wants to experience the musicians, and there comes a point you've seen somebody multiple times, and you go, okay, I want a bit more of the musicianship, or at least the personality, and you keep filling it with fog here, and that could feel a bit samey. I think part of our challenge has been our gaps in playing. So, you know, Leo and I are rehearsing right now. We're putting together sounds, tracks, and testing our gear again. But we haven't played a single show or gotten together for band practice since before the health tour, maybe that month before in 2022. So, you know, when we're getting up to the point here where we're getting ready to go, we're like, well, these elements worked. So I know that there will be some developments, including with when we tour separately the pop project. However that's going to turn out, it'll be no less intense, but you know, we may have a different set design in some regard. There's going to be some thought put into that because, I mean, that has the reason we started with the fog and the strobes was due to the intensity. It wasn't just to just be annoying. It was because with the music, it had its effect, and the more we would have people talk with us, and this is especially the early days with house shows where you could really squeeze people in and give them panic. The feedback on that was like, oh, this is really working, and there's no replacement for it.
Mhm.
There will have to be maybe at some point or a balance of some kind, or we just do basement tours for a future tour. I don't know.
I like house shows. Those are always just fun and just like, you know what? I'm not here to impress. I'm just here to have fun and just let's let the freak flag fly. You know what I mean? So,
Oh, hell yes. Yeah. Yeah. No, some of those house shows we did in like from 2014 to 2016, I'll never forget them. Just the screaming and the people running, walking out, running out. That's so good.
Yeah, and I mean, and to be honest, like part of it is also like budget. I mean, if budget didn't have a factor in it, like we would be looking for ways to take you know the lights and the visuals to a place of just like as extreme and as crazy as we could possibly make it.
right.
It's kind of like you know when you're trying to capture that kind of uh, feeling on a budget, you know, like strobes and fogs will get you there, you know, and but like yeah, I mean we obviously like you know I mean we've had so many crazy ideas over the years of things we wanted to try, but it's just like it's just kind of like well you know maybe when we have the money. I mean we've talked about like having like animatronic creatures on stage and all kinds of stuff and like you know but when you really look at the numbers on those things it's like it's not very practical and you know also being able to kind of move that stuff from city to city you
Um, Tell me about. I still got a little bit more time with you guys. I'm not overstaying my welcome here.
No,
know
absolutely not.
Okay, we're good.
no
Okay,
no good.
just because I'm like, I got a couple more questions, then I'll let you go. Performing live on stage, Leo, do you feel like it's every time you perform live, just giving it your all? Does it feel very cathartic, and you feel like you're just releasing these demons?
All right, hold on 1 second.
No, you're good.
I'm going to try to answer that for him, even though I've never sung a note live. I'm gonna because I've you know you experience each other later, like in the van driving away, and
Yes.
I definitely think there's an ebb and flow, most likely to that stuff. I know that he is feeling it the most when there's crowd interaction and a feeling, and he's been able to see it. And then there are shows where, like, say, our first tour in Europe with Boston Naj,
Hmm.
there weren't a lot of people there, and I remember his disappointment. And for me, I can close my eyes and move and feel the music, and a little bit of strobes and this and that. It's almost the same experience. It's disappointing later to hear, hey, no one was experiencing that with with us. So
Yeah.
I know there's some of that.
Yeah. So sorry, I had to step outside because
You're good. You're good.
you asked me if getting up on stage exercises the demons.
Yes.
Uh, uh, I mean, I would never go so far as to say that. I mean, I think like, every performance is about doing the absolute best you can to translate your intention of what you want to give to the people in the audience, with the music that you've made and how you're presenting it. So like, yeah, like I'm looking for ways to find that feeling when I'm on stage, and like a lot of, sometimes you play shows and you can't hear shit, like the music is mixed bad in the monitors, or, like Shaun said, like maybe the turnout's not great. So you kind of have to like I know like when I'm up there and it's like I'm struggling to find that feeling, and so maybe I'll get out there with the crowd, or I'll do something physically that kind of like maybe amps up that feeling or something. So it's like it's definitely a show by show basis, but like for me, like my main concern is like trying to give the audience a good show, and in a way that feels honest and true to the art that we've created. So it's not really like, I don't necessarily like come off stage feeling like, oh, I feel better about my life now. It's like, it's more just like, did I do a good job or not,
Yeah, that makes 100% sense. Shaun, tell me about your gear setup on stage. What do you use, and how do you take it from the studio to the stage?
Yeah, the so I spend months getting together any backing tracks that we use, and we use a considerable amount, but I mix them in our QSC system that, well, we've actually had to replace from the time that we took them with us. And we would take them with us so that we could control the environment in some of those smaller spaces, because for a while there we were touring and playing house shows, and someone would just have a PA, and if we had just relegated it to that, the intensity would be lost. So part of the show is the sound itself, being able to feel all the low end, and the lights and everything, and it's an all-inclusive package. I always have a couple keyboards on hand to get together some samples from each track and play a part that I'm comfortable with. It could be lead lines here and there, MIDI trigger, or some samples from the movies, synth pads that can go in the interludes, and then often an additional keyboard that isn't MIDI related that can just play. I can just jump over and play that. So they can't, any of the backing tracks, they just can't be pulled from the record because they often are just so blown out and distorted from mastering, the volume wars. So we have gotten into a situation where sometimes people come away from the live experience enjoying it more because of the clarity, because I'm spending so much time working on the various elements to make it more impactful live. So they end up sounding like the records, but just with much more impact in some parts, from especially the space between the bass and the drums. So and also, we've, with this project, for better or worse, sometimes worse, we get packaged with metal bands, and that was another reason to bring out the system. We're like, well, this is how we compete with these bands that are a full band, drums, bass, multiple guitars. They're going to blow us out of the water. But often we would come in and just have that low end, that sub, just crushing through, which really helped us as far as we know. Sometimes we wouldn't mix well with people who want that type of music. We felt that way a little bit when we toured with Portrayal. We were great friends of ours, and I love them.
Yeah.
I love that band so much. But a lot of their fans were like, "What is this silly bleep bloop?" I felt a little bit of the old school crossed arms,
Yep.
staring you down vibe. So that's okay. Comes with the territory, I suppose.
I think you guys are gonna be paired nicely with Youth Code. I saw them open for Skinny Puppy, and I was so excited to see Youth Code. And it was funny when they came through St. Louis. I think it was with Frontline Assembly and Skinny Puppy and Youth Code. Nobody came to like this. Like we were all just like, dude, the band pumped me up, and I was excited about their new record coming out, and it's perfect timing for you guys because now you guys are kind of going to be sharing this time where it's like, oh, great, new Youth Code, new Street Sects is going to be amazing. And I think your guys are going to be paired nicely with Youth Code for sure.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we're really stoked on it. We've been in, obviously constant contact with King Yosef as well for various things, and I saw him when he came through with Health, and they played in Austin, and he's got an awesome band,
Yeah.
full band, and
Yeah.
they rip hard. So I'm very, very stoked.
Yeah, I saw a lot of their promotions and stuff like that on Instagram, and I'm just like, it's gonna be a great tour, man. I'm so pumped and excited for you guys. It's gonna be incredible. Hopefully, everybody shows up. Anybody listening to this, please, you don't miss this tour lineup at Donut. Yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah, we're super excited. Personally, I think it's like a real treat for fans of industrial music in 2025. Like as far as like fans who want to hear new stuff. You know, not necessarily the classic stuff, but like who are still interested in industrial, like and where it's gone today.
Yeah, and it's still like a thriving scene. Like I talk with a lot of musicians, in the industrial and post-punk, and they're like, it's kind of peaking up there. So it's like it's a really exciting time where, industrial is kind of just making this sort of crazy comeback, and I think you guys had the perfect timing. Let me ask, I'm trying to look through my notes here. What was probably the most insane artist that you've ever toured with where it was like, oh my God, I never thought we'd share the stage with this band?
Oh, I had a different thought at first, the first half of that question, because there was a crazy artist, and then
Yeah, you can do both if you want. Yeah.
there's we're sharing the stage.
Yeah, you can go with crazy artist if you want.
Well, sometimes with sharing the stage, because we started so late, I'm still not over the venues themselves.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's not that it's the particular tour. It's playing at certain venues that artists I've always admired played at, and even though they're not there, and it's difficult to put your mindset there. Go, I think this person played on this day, and now why am I here? This is absurd.
A real moment. Yeah.
Yeah. Then the first part that I thought it was going, I can't pronounce his name. Do you remember the name of the artist, Leo, that was in Europe who had the animal blood all over him? It starts with a T. It's like
tripping around. I couldn't tell you how to pronounce that.
Yeah, he had like vials of animal blood that he would put on himself. It was just one person, and he did a sort of heavy, growly vocal style with industrial beats, and that sort of getting lost in a swell of distortion in a cave sort of feel. But he would douse himself in the animal blood beforehand, and there were a number of times. Not only did it look wild on stage, but there were a number of times I would like, oh, I got to use the restroom before we get out there, and there's to be blood all over the bathroom. And I was it's like it looked like a murder scene.
So in Europe, like real animal blood, like, or is this just stage blood in general?
It's
No, I think it was real pig's blood.
Oh my God.
It had
because I remember going in the bathroom after him, and it would stink. I mean, you could smell the iron and the blood.
Smell of like metallic and pink.
Yeah.
Oh.
But as far as like bands for me that were just like, I can't believe we're playing it. Like the first time that ever happened for us was when we played the Dialect. We went on tour with them.
Yes, yep.
I had been a fan of them since the early 2000s when that record from the Filthy Tongues of Gods and Griots, however you pronounce that,
Yeah.
came out on Ipecac, and like I had been following Ipecac records since day one, since the day that record label started, and
Oh
I
yeah.
bought that record right when it came out, and so that was to me like the first, like, and I was legitimately like nervous around those guys like for the first handful of shows, and it's like, man, like I've been listening to these guys for 15 plus years, and then I would say the other one, for me, and Shaun would probably agree with this, would be Health, because we've both been big fans of Health like since their first album, and that
Yep.
was kind of a surreal before Street Sex ever even began. So that was kind of a surreal experience to do that.
Yeah, and actually, our first show with them was an add-on. I don't know if you were just in contact with Johnny at the time, but we got asked to, somebody maybe bailed or something. They needed somebody, maybe somebody locally couldn't play. So we were asked, I want to say in 2018, to join them for a show in Houston with Youth Code. We had never met Youth Code. That's the only time we've met them, and everybody was fantastic. And that was just a great introduction to everyone. But I also want to add, with Dialect, again, that is actually, that record he mentioned was an early one for me and Leo. We would talk about the Ipecac bands, and I remember listening to that one. I think, sorry Dialect, but I think I had ripped it from Soulseek in like 2003 maybe. But what a first impression. So I was the same. I don't know. I can't always control how I am around people with my weird nervousness. So I saw them, Mike and Will, sitting at the table. It was one of those venues where, there's the stage and then there's a lot of like tables, and I think they're even serving food in there. I never really like when that happens. It's weird smells of like burgers cooking, but yet you're performing. It's very strange. But I saw them and I go, okay, that's them. And I was a little too enthusiastic. I mean, that was one of our early tours. I was like, hey, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I remember Will in particular, like his eyes open, like, whoa, okay. Yeah, who let this fool in? But the other thing about that is, so we went on first, of course, and what a great first impression, because at first, within like the first song, someone had a seizure, which was terrible for
Oh.
that for that person especially, and we had to stop the show, make sure they were okay, and they were okay, and I believe they stayed. They were like, "Oh hell yeah, keep going." But for a moment, it was like, "Oh no, we're derailing this." So that was definitely a great tour.
That's wild you brought up, Mike Patton, because Leo, you share a lot of the same elements that Mike Patton brings with the different vocal types, where you're crooning, singing, screaming, just adding all these different styles vocally. Did you draw a lot of inspiration from Mike Patton when you're kind of trying to figure out yourself vocally?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, when the Real Thing came out, I want to say it came out like 90 or 91. I mean, that was like shortly after, maybe a couple of years after Injustice for All. So like, I mean, I was mostly listening to metal around the time that record came out, but it was just so different than anything I'd ever heard. And then of course Angel Dust came out after that, and that record honestly changed my life. I just, like, to me that was like just one of the most forward thinking and experimental albums, that was also still kind of like song structured,
Yeah.
that I had heard at that level. And, his voice, the way he could do different characters and do different voices, definitely like, when I was a teenager, probably Mike Patton and Morrissey were definitely the two biggest influences on me as far as like vocalists, lyricists, kind of, in that order, just the people that I really kind of studied and just kind of just listened to nonstop and incessantly.
Yeah. I know fans would kick my ass if I don't bring up gentrification. Tell me about just kind of bringing that project together and how you kind of conceptualized the idea and then kind of spaced everything out. Was it just kind of a work in progress, or was this something pre worked on before even putting it out?
No, the concept and everything for it came at the same time. All of the album covers and all of the titles for each individual piece were all conceptualized at the same time before we ever even put the first 7-inch out. In fact, we commissioned AJ to do all of that artwork was done, even all the way up to number 5 before we ever even put out Imposition. What happened was it just took a little bit of time to like finish it out because we kept, kind of getting, waylaid and distracted by releases, like full length releases, and the Kicking Mule and Rat Jacket, and 7 inches are kind of, what I've come to learn is that a lot of labels don't love 7 inches because they don't sell as well. They're a harder thing to sell, like a vinyl with only 2 songs on it, as opposed to a full length or an EP. Yeah, I mean, I've talked about this before, but like I was working at a bar. One of the first jobs I got when I moved back to Austin was working at a bar like on the east side of Austin, which, people who have been in Austin much longer than we have can tell you that the east side used to be kind of, kind of like, what you would call the rougher side of the highway.
Yeah.
And when we moved here, it was in the middle of being gentrified, but it was still kind of in a transition phase. And so when I was working at this particular bar, I started working there right as they opened. And this was like a craft cocktail yuppie bar with like douchebag rich owners, like just like the worst kind of people, for the worst kind of clientele. But they, at that point in time, were the furthest bar east on East 6th Street at that time. And so I would see a lot of people who lived in the neighborhood who had resentment towards the gentrification that was happening there, rightfully so. And they would kind of come by to just spit, because I was working the door. I was just standing outside working the door all night, and they'd come by and they'd just like spit at the building, and like and it was like, and it was more than a gesture. Like you could see that these people were angry, they were upset, and so I guess I kind of thought about that whole thing in a way that I never thought about it before because I'm seeing it, and like one thing that we've never really wanted to do as a band is kind of have any overtly political kind of statements or anything about that. So like I guess it kind of inspired me in a way of like, I kind of wanted to do a project that was almost kind of written at a ground level perspective from people in the midst of a neighborhood or neighborhoods that were kind of going through the gentrification process, but like on both sides. And on both sides, I don't mean sympathizing with both sides. I just mean like when something like this changes a piece of real estate or a neighborhood or a community or a group of people, you're going to have all kinds of different things happening, from incidents to just people not caring, to people caring, to people, there's a lot of emotions boiling up. And I thought that was a really kind of ripe creative ground to kind of explore from a fictional crime noir perspective, but also something that I could kind of, at least from an emotional perspective of rage and anger and fear, things that I could relate to and kind of grab a hold of.
100%. Shaun, is there anything you want to add to the gentrification collection?
Just the struggle to get up the money to self-release those first 2. I remember the first one, I was working, I think through both of them, I was doing valet for a Sheraton hotel and just trying to squirrel away every last dollar. I know for Broken Windows, Sunken Ceilings, Leo was working at a different bar. It might have been this place on Rainy Street in Austin at that point. It was through a South by, and I remember you had gotten like almost the exact dollar amount for whatever we needed to pay to get it pressed. Do you remember that?
Vaguely. I do remember that we were spending literally everything we had and then some to get those things out there.
Yeah. I and also this is unrelated to the series, but I had a funny moment because I was again doing valet and at this hotel. It must have been through another festival, but that band, the OCs, or maybe they've changed their name to I think they've shortened it. But they were the OCs at one point, kind of experimental punk band. Yeah. The singer was staying at the hotel, and he drove up. I had to park his car, and I had a copy of The Morning After, and I wrote a little note, slipped it in, and I waited until he walked back up, and I saw him lean in and peer at it. And course, you know, he probably threw that right in the trash. Yeah, those early 7 inches were just they were just part of that process of like getting off the ground for those. And it was great to work with the Flenser after that, and that Jonathan was cool with kind of taking on that project and, you know, fulfilling the rest of it, putting out the remaining ones.
Yeah, I mean those incredible, incredible albums. How did you guys come in contact with AJ, your guys's, you know, cover artist, and tell me about that, how that kind of came together. And he's obviously sticking around this long, so
Leo. I think Leo was the first to be in contact with him.
okay.
Yeah, sorry, I've been trying to mute myself while I'm walking around and doing
No,
patrol
you're
and stuff.
good. Yeah, I'll let you guys go here in a little bit. I just want to kind
Yeah,
of cover on the
yeah,
ground.
I think I got to jump off after this question. But AJ met through he at the time was the current boyfriend of an ex girlfriend of mine, and I had stayed friends with her. And you know, we had been trying to figure out how we were gonna, because I had conceptualized all these covers for the gentrification things, like how they were gonna look and the scenes that were going to be displayed. And we were originally going to do them as photographs, and we just kind of eventually decided that that wasn't gonna be practical, and we weren't going to be able to pull it off the way we wanted to. And we actually had a different artist, this painter that I worked with at that same shitty bar I told you about a minute ago, who did like a painting for the first 7 inch, but it just wasn't. I mean, it was a cool painting, but it just wasn't what we wanted. And so she told me about this guy she was dating and how he used to be a cartoonist for the Austin Chronicle, like doing political cartoons and stuff. And you know, I checked out his work, and I was like, "This is the guy." I mean, it was just it just had that like kind of that classic pulp Sunday comic strip style, but like also kind of makes you think a little bit of like, you know, what's his name, the Black Flag artist.
Pettibon?
Yes, Pettibone. I was thinking Pennybaker, but no, that's the guy that made the documentaries. But but yeah, so like, you know, we're just like, I reached out to him and he was down to do it, and yeah, and since then we've stayed good friends with him and continued to work with him. You know, we've worked with several other artists, you know, to kind of mix it up over the years, but you know, we always come back to AJ, and you know, he did Dry Drunk, the new cover. We knew we had to have him because, you know, like I said, this record is kind of a spiritual sequel to Imposition, which he did the cover art for. So we kind of wanted to kind of, you know, have that kind of that classic Street Sex look.
Yeah, perfect. All right. Well, thank you guys so much for your time. I really appreciate it. Is there anything else you want to add before I let you go?
I'll just say thank you so much. Thank you for reaching out to us, and thank you for, you know, for listening to us and you know, caring enough about this music to look into it this deeply and ask us these questions. We appreciate it.
Thank you, man.
I,
Yeah.
I second that. Thank you, Justin.
Thank you guys. I really appreciate your time.
Okay. Have a good day.
All right. See you guys. Bye.